We are back from the coffee break and we are continuing for the next presentation. Now representing the SUCEDE research group here at the University of Valladolid, we have Dr. Antonio Arjona and Dr. Rosa Maria Beño. They will present alterations of self-experience and corollary discharge mechanisms, focusing on electroencephalography, markers of the N1 potential. Okay.
Okay, so in my presentation, I'm going to talk about the relationship between corollary discharge and anomalous self-experiences. And I will give a very, very brief introduction, discuss why we decide to start this research, and then move on to the results. In this section, I will focus on the post-stimulus findings, and then my colleague Antonio will present the pre-stimulus results related to the readiness potential. So I'm going to skip this very quickly because Luis also talked about that. So we know that the sense of self refers to the subjective notion of oneself and comprise different levels. The first one is the SUCEDE. It is a pre-reflective and preconscious and tacit level of identity, and it involves the implicit owners that experience is structured from a first-person perspective. So this is the most basic level of selfhood, and is the basis of the other levels, the reflective self and also the narrative self. So when we talk about disturbance in the sense of self, they primarily involve alterations in SUCEDE. Oh. So this is what we know as anomalous self-experiences. There are different types of these experiences. Some of them are alterations in the stream of consciousness, so the natural flow of mental processes are altered, and some thoughts become anonymous or concrete rather than abstract. The sense of presence, the sense of corporeality, so the body is experienced as an object rather than the medium of experience. The boundaries between the self and the world are also altered. And there is, as an attempt to explain or justify this disruption, there is also an increased concern in more metaphysical or philosophical questions. So the SUCEDE disturbance model suggests that psychotic symptoms may be based on disturbance of SUCEDE and therefore related to anomalous self-experiences. So, for example, in the case of positive symptoms, this model explains them as a reduced sense of agency, which blurs the boundary between the self and others, leading to hallucinations or passivity experiences. Regarding the negative symptoms, they are explained by an excessive focus on or implicit processes. So this will reduce the spontaneity, the motivation, and the vitality. And the disorganized symptoms are understood as the result of a proliferation of perspectives. So anomalous self-experiences are an important domain for understanding psychotic disorders, and they may even help explain other symptoms. They can also act as an early marker, helping to predict the transition to psychosis in individuals at high risk beyond other clinical symptoms. Another important point is that they are more stable over time than symptoms, and they are also preconscious. So we infer that these experiences are more likely to be closer to neurobiological processes than clinical symptoms. So this leads to the question, what could be one of the underlying mechanisms? The other main concept of this presentation is the corollary discharge that Tom previously explained this perfectly, so I'm going to skip this. And more related to our study, in the auditory domain, right now I know that the voice I am hearing is my own because I am the one who is speaking. So that is, I am performing a motor act that generates the auditory stimulus that I am hearing. But this mechanism has been shown to be altered in schizophrenia. There is a review by Thomas Whitford that he also talked before about this. And so going back to the rationale of our study, alterations in corollary discharge have been consistently found in schizophrenia, suggesting that it might be a transdiagnostic mechanism of psychosis. We also know that this mechanism helps us distinguish the source of stimuli and is essential for the sense of agency and the sense of self. So it can offer a more direct and objective way to study self-experiences, as also Vicente Molina said before. It has been proposed that an early dysfunction of the corollary discharge mechanisms could impair the coordination between a person's sensoriomotor actions and the environment, reducing this sense of agency. However, this relationship had not been tested before we started our study. So to assess the corollary discharge, we follow the protocol published by Judith Ford that is going to close the session. So we are also very pleased that she is here with us. And as my colleague Luis explained yesterday and also Tom did before, so there are two conditions. In the top condition, participants are vocalizing the vowel A, and in the listen, they are just passively listen to a recording of their own voice. So when we perceive auditory stimuli, the N1 and P2 the N1 and the P2 event-related potentials are primarily generated in the auditory cortex, and the suppression of the N1 ERP during speech can be taken as a measure of the corollary discharge functioning, because N1 component is a very early component and therefore reflects sensory level processing of the stimulus. And in addition to these two conditions, we also add the listen other condition to investigate whether the identification of self-generated speech depends on motor or sensory processes. And the only difference from the listen self condition is that participants passively listen to the voice of another person. Well, this is a picture of our lab. And to assess anomalous self-experiences, we use the Spanish validated version of the inventory of psychotic-like anomalous self-experiences. For positive symptoms, we use the positive and negative syndromes scale. And for the negative symptoms, the total score of the BNSS. Now we move on to the results section. I will start by presenting the findings in healthy controls that we replicate previous studies that we have also seen during this session. So all the figures that I will show have time on the x-axis and microvolts on the y. The red line, I think that you can see my pointer. Yeah. So the red line shows the vocal potentials in the talk condition. The blue line corresponds to the listening self condition. And we also here in the healthy controls study, we include the black line for the listen other condition. So we replicate, as I said, we replicated previous findings, and also we studied the two passive conditions. So the fact that no difference were found in N1 amplitude between these two passive listening conditions indicates that auditory cortical responses are similar regardless of whether the voice being heard is recognized as one's own or not. Thus, while speaking, we don't identify our own voice based on the physical characteristics of the auditory stimulus. Moreover, the N1 suppression observed, we can see here in the talk condition the suppression that we found in this ERP. So we observe this when participants hear their own voice during a speech, and this supports the involvement of corollary discharge in suppression sensory responses to self-generated speech, indicating that the stimulus is originated from one's own action. So finally, the preserved P2 component in the talk condition also indicates that there is a sound perception. So the N1 suppression that we see here is unlikely to reflect perceptual deficits, and instead it reflects the corollary discharge functioning, because we also see a P2 component here in the talk condition. So after these findings, now we introduce a group of participants with schizophrenia. And on the left, we saw the waveform from participants with schizophrenia, and the right, healthy controls. We can see in people with schizophrenia that although N1 suppression is still present, is much larger than in healthy controls, where it is almost absent. And this didn't correlate with the dose of antipsychotic medication. So regarding the correlation between N1 suppression and symptoms, in these figures, the red line represents first episode patients, the blue line chronic patients, and the black line is the overall schizophrenia group. We found that lower N1 suppression, that is more similar auditory cortical activity during passive listening and during self-generated speech, was associated with higher scores in positive symptoms, that is this figure, negative symptoms, and most importantly, at least to us, in anomalous self-experiences. So summarizing these findings, the reduced N1 suppression during speech suggests an alteration in line with previous literature. And this disruption has been associated with reduced integrity of the arcuate fasciculus, cortical hyperactivation, GABAergic deficits. So we infer that impaired inhibitory function may lead to disorganized neural activity, resulting in contributing to aberrant salience and deficits in source monitoring. So this all may alter the preconscious experience of the self and the external world, and manifest as anomalous self-experiences, affecting the sense of SUCEDE, and also contributing to both positive and negative symptoms. And finally, we also include a bipolar disorder group. And here, the bipolar disorder group is in the middle. This is healthy controls and schizophrenia patients. So we can see that the M1 suppression in the bipolar group is not as statistically significant when compared with either healthy controls or schizophrenia patients. However, if we look at this figure below, we can see that the M1 suppression in healthy controls, that is the solid line, is greater than in the other two groups. And the individuals with bipolar disorder, that is this one, saw a slightly greater suppression than those with schizophrenia, that is this one. And regarding the association with anomalous self-experiences, as I say, we previously found a significant relationship between reduced M1 suppression and anomalous self-experiences in schizophrenia, which was not observed in the bipolar disorder group. So, to sum up our conclusions, the alterations in the corollary discharge mechanism has been proposed as a transdiagnostic factor in psychosis. And we know that the psychotic spectrum includes disorders with blurred boundaries, such as bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. And our results show that patients with bipolar disorder exhibit an intermediate level of sensory attenuation between healthy controls and schizophrenia. Importantly, both groups preserve M1 response during passive listening to their own voice, suggesting intact sensory recognition. So the M1 suppression is not because of this. And overall, these findings support a link between corollary discharge alterations and psychotic features, which may be present in a smaller subgroup of patients with bipolar disorder than in schizophrenia. This is our interpretation. And this suggests the coexistence of different patients' biotypes within the psychosis spectrum, with corollary discharge alterations and anomalous experiences characterizing a specific subgroup. So this is my last slide. And given these results, the high heterogeneity of symptoms across the psychotic spectrum, our next step is to examine whether the biotypes already characterized based on cognitive alteration differ in corollary discharge functioning. And we will tell you in the next conference what we find here. So now I leave you with Antonio, who will talk about the pre-stimulus analysis that he is working on. And maybe later we can discuss about this.
So, okay, so after analyzing what happened in the millisecond following speech production, now I'm going to speak about what happened okay. now I want to see, or we wanted to see, what happened in the windows, in what we call the pre-speech activity, which is about the window before the person speaks. I mean, we are talking about the 500 milliseconds before participants talk in the same task. Right. So first, it's important to distinguish between motor preparation paradigms and speech preparation paradigms, because they look alike, but they are a bit different when we talk about neural activity. So as we have been listening in previous talks, there is a negativity which appears in the milliseconds or in the seconds before participants make a voluntary movement, like in this graphic. You can see around the vertex this negativity. Here we are talking about the readiness potential, about motor paradigms. And in our study, we are working about speech preparation paradigms. So this study is from Judith Ford, and here we can see this pre-speech negativity that appears before a participant, in this case a healthy control, speak. As we can see, there is a negativity like 300 milliseconds previously to the talking, in the talk condition, which is smaller than when we talk about a voluntary movement. Here we have the first difference between motor paradigm and speech paradigms. And also, as we've seen this figure, it looks like this preparation is more around frontal electrodes. So, what do we have? We analyzed 48 schizophrenia patients, 55 healthy controls, and we found these results. At the top we have healthy controls, and at the bottom we have the schizophrenia patients. And what can we see here? We can see that healthy controls show this negativity in mostly around the vertex in the time window previous to the talking, and this negativity does not appear in schizophrenia patients. So here we found our first interesting result. Also, we wanted to see if this pre-speech negativity was related to the posterior suppression of the N1 component, as Rosa just explained. And we found this correlation between, in the left side, we have the correlation of healthy controls, and we can see this that higher negativity before speaking means higher suppression of the N1 component, and this doesn't happen in the schizophrenia patients, which are in the right panel. So our first conclusion was that pre-speech negativity can be considered a speech-related readiness potential reflecting action preparation and a forensic copy mechanism rather than a classical motor paradigm. Next, now we wanted to see if this reduced activation of the corollary discharge mechanism in a schizophrenia patient could be associated with a pre-speech deficit
in frontotemporal connectivity. So first, we look in previous studies, and we found that in the same paper that before, Judith Ford talked about an increased frontotemporal theta connectivity, coherence in this case, in the talk condition compared with listen condition during pre-speech onset period. So we center our focus in this band, in theta band, because it looks like it's more involved in this frontal temporal interaction and prediction. Going back to our data, we have in this case 51 schizophrenia patients and 54 healthy controls, and we analyze the imaginary coherence between frontal area, the broadcast area, and Wernicke's area in the temporal. And we found these results in the theta band. What can we see here? We have the listen condition at the top, talk condition at the bottom, and as you can see now, healthy controls at the left side show an increase in theta connectivity during the last 300 milliseconds before speaking. And this increase is reduced in patients with schizophrenia. Instead, in the listen condition, patients show a higher level of global theta connectivity compared to controls. These differences are clearer when we overlay the curves from both groups within each condition. Listen to the left, talk to the right. And then we perform a statistical analysis in the time window from -300 to -100 milliseconds. And it shows a significant group by condition interaction. How we interpret this result? Well, we think that this interaction will be reflecting this higher or stronger pre-speech increase in theta connectivity in healthy controls compared to patients with schizophrenia, and the higher global theta connectivity in patients with schizophrenia, which could be related to the neural hyperactivity of this group. Okay, one final question that we made to ourselves was whether these theta differences were specific to this frequency band, theta band. So to solve this question, we first analyze the alpha band, I mean the same analysis, but with the alpha band. And we found that there was an increase related to the speech preparation, neither in controls nor in schizophrenia patients. And statistically talking, there was no significant group for condition effect. And finally, we analyze beta band also to see if there is something in this band. And we found mostly the same. No effects were observed related to speech preparation, and no significant group for condition effects. So, with all this, as preliminary conclusions, because this is our first analysis of this, related to imaginary coherence, what can we say? We can say that healthy controls show a pre-speech increase in frontotemporal theta connectivity consistent with this engagement of the corollary discharge prior to speech production. We also might conclude that patients with schizophrenia show higher baseline hyperactivity, which might prevent the emergence of this pre-speech theta connectivity needed for speech preparation. And all these findings together, I link altered pre-speech neural preparation with reduced sensory suppression of the N1 component during speech in patients with schizophrenia. That's all. I've been so quick.
Thank you, Antonio. Very good results.